Our next guest made headlines this past weekend with his responses to government as usual in Washington. Joining me now with his first reaction to President Obama's State of the Union address, Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, good to see you tonight. And your thoughts on the president's message this evening?
Well, Megan, it's always great to join you. I thought the speech tonight was really disappointing. You know, the president had an opportunity to be magnanimous, to be gracious, to recognize that just 2 months ago the American people voted overwhelmingly rejecting the current path we're on. And he could have said, I hear you, and we will work together. We'll get back to where we should have been in the first place. We should have been focusing on jobs and economic growth and opportunity. But instead, the president didn't do that. He didn't listen to the voters who are hurting right now. Instead, he just doubled down on the same failed policies of the last 6 years, more and more taxes and spending and debt, and it's not working. And it really was disappointing to see the president refusing to acknowledge the overwhelming sentiment of the American people that we want a different path. We want robust economic growth. We want people to be able to achieve the American dream, and that's getting harder and harder right now.
He says it is working. He calls it middle-class economics and says the verdict is in. It's working. Some of the stats offered by the president and in some of the news reports today: unemployment down to 5.6%, gasoline prices down, stock markets are up, economy grew by 5% in the third quarter of last year, its fastest rate in more than a decade. How can you hit him on the economy?
Because the facts are we're facing right now a divided America when it comes to the economy. It is true that the top 1% are doing great under Barack Obama. Today, the top 1% earn a higher share of our national income than any year since 1928. The sad reality is, with big government under the Obama administration, the rich and powerful, those who walk the corridors of power in the Obama administration, have gotten fat and happy. But working men and women across this country, we have the lowest labor force participation since 1978. The reason the unemployment rate keeps falling is millions of people keep dropping out of the workforce altogether, so they're not counted in that number. And I'll tell you, wage stagnation. For over a decade now, median wages have stagnated, and this is an administration that benefits those with connections to Washington, with influence, and hardworking men and women are finding it just harder to make ends meet. We need to be fighting for the working men and women, not those with power in Washington.
The president says he wants to work with Republicans, and yet came out tonight in no uncertain terms and really threatened at least 4 vetoes on several matters, from the rollback of his immigration policies to Iran sanctions to Keystone Pipeline and on it went, Obamacare changes and so on. Do you think his offer to work with the Republicans, I guess outside of those issues, is in earnest?
Look, the only area where I saw any genuine interest in working with Republicans is perhaps on free trade, although he's got a problem with his own party. An awful lot of Democratic members of the House stayed sitting and didn't applaud then. On everything else, he had rhetoric of inclusion in between threatening to veto over and over and over again common sense bipartisan legislation. You know, the Senate is getting ready to pass the Keystone Pipeline. We'll pass it with a bipartisan supermajority, and yet the president has said he'll veto it, even though an overwhelming majority of Americans want those jobs, want the energy independence, recognize this as a common sense step. Iran sanctions is another example. There are enormous threats. The greatest threat to our national security is Iran acquiring a nuclear weapons capability, and yet the president is dug in on a negotiation strategy that is making it more likely that Iran acquires nukes.
Last question quickly on this. Do you think that the president was setting the stage for the next Democratic presidential candidate?
Oh, I think he was trying to, and I think he hopes that the next candidate engages in the same far-left policies. This is a man of the left. You know, it reminds me of the classic Saturday Night Live skit with Christopher Walken, where, if you remember, there's a band playing, and his solution to every problem is more cowbell, more cowbell. Well, for President Obama, more cowbell is more taxes, more government, more taxes, more government.
The audience knows that the focus group is familiar with this skit. Sorry, go ahead and finish your point, sir.
Well, look, it's the same failed policies that don't work. And we ought to come together. Economic growth should be a bipartisan objective, and I think Congress needs to lead. If the president's not going to lead, it's incumbent on us to lead and to listen to the American people and to work to bring back economic growth and jobs.
Senator Ted Cruz, great to see you.
Great to be with you.